Welcome to Saturday Night at the Movies, the podcast that celebrates classic, cult, and current films and the people that made them, and many other aspects of pop culture. I'm your host, Steve Rubin. Our producer is Ben Shrewsbury, and our signature theme was composed by Greg Lerhoff. Here it's always Saturday night, and our mission is to chronicle film and pop cultural history one memory at a time. Tonight, in continuing my 60th anniversary celebrations of the James Bond series, Thunderball is coming up this Christmas. I'm dipping into my personal interview archives and presenting the original interview I did with 007 film producer Albert R. Broccoli, known affectionately to his friends and family as Cubby. This was for my first book on Bond, the James Bond Films of Behind-the-Scenes History, published in 1981. Completed on audio only in Mr. Broccoli's office at the old MGM Thalberg Building in Culver City in the spring of 1977, I think you'll find this chunk of audio history pretty interesting. Forgive the hissing in the background. This was done on a 70s-era cassette recorder long before digital existed. It plays a little fast. I sound like I'm about 14, although I was 25 at the time. We not only talk about the birth of Bond, the casting, the very beginnings, but we get to know Mr. Broccoli's background from himself, dating back to his uncle who indeed brought the broccoli seed to America in 1900. I hope you enjoy it.
I've talked to a number of people. Everybody seems to have their own viewpoint of how Sean was discovered, and even I think some of the newspapers claim there was a contest that the public determined who they liked. Peter Hunt said that Sean was in a film, I think it was called, with a comedian. He was like an Abbott and Costello film with a comedian, and he was like the straight man. And
Sean was in a picture called Darby O'Gill and the Little People.
A Walt Disney film, yes.
And I saw him at Colvin Studios. Ran the picture with my wife, and I said, "That's the guy we want to see." Then we saw another picture he was making for Benny Fish.
That's the name of the film.
Which was he played like a part of like. In Mice and Men, like Lenny in Mice and Men, a dumb picture.
Right. That's the one Hunt mentioned.
And that was when I got in touch with the agent and had him come in to see us. Coming to see Harry and me.
No, he wasn't your first choice, was he? He wasn't your first choice for James Bond, didn't you have? Sean. Was he? He wasn't the first person you wanted, didn't you?
He was the first person we selected, yeah. Who was?
Well, I mean, as an idea, because I heard mention that.
Well, I mean, everybody was told, actually.
James Mason agreed to do a couple of them?
No, James Mason was bullshit. James Mason, we never. He didn't agree to do any because we didn't feel that he was. I don't know who said that. Who said that? This guy, him?
Terrence, I think, said that. I think wasn't your.
Sean was signed when Terrence came on the picture. It was a fait accompli. And he always says that he found him and all that because he was, in fact, when we told him, he was very upset. I don't want to say that now, but he was very upset because he wanted another guy, another Englishman.
Richard Johnson?
Richard Johnson, yeah.
I interviewed Richard Johnson only because he did another film which I was doing research on.
Yeah.
Richard wouldn't commit though to 7 years. Wasn't the contract for 7 years?
No, Richard, we never talked to Richard Johnson. He wanted Richard Johnson, but we said, "Look, Terrence, it's all finished. Sean is signed, and he's going to do the picture." No, we never told.
From what Terrence says here, he thought Sean at first was a little too coarse for the role, not enough suave enough. Terrence said Sean, I think here, was a little coarse for the role at first, and that he had to be made to look like a suave secret agent.
Well, I mean, he was. Once he started, he was okay. I mean, Sean felt he was not right because he didn't think he was a good enough actor. But to say a lot of things, I mean, like, for instance, you come up with something like, what's his name wouldn't do it because we wanted to sign him for 7 years.
Richard Johnson?
Richard Johnson, I don't know if anybody in our organization talked to Richard Johnson. Nobody, because he was not a choice between you and me, but I don't want to offend him, and I don't want to record it there because he wouldn't.
Okay, well, I understand.
You understand what I'm saying? Right. Anyway, the point about, getting these things accurate is Terrence is a lovely man, and he's a very good friend of mine. And he, did the first of these things and did a good job of it. And but he tends a bit to forget, and he thinks, that he discovered Sean and all of that sort of thing. But whether he says it here, I don't know.
Was Roger Moore ever considered early on?
Roger Moore was talked about. Harry talked about Roger Moore earlier.
But he was committed to a television project and
Well, he was a bit too, at that point, he was a bit too pretty boy. He's matured and aged a little now.
Mm-hmm.
And he was not, he wasn't chosen until later, after the Lazenby incident, you see.
What was your interpretation of James Bond? Was exactly from the Fleming novels that you want to get as close as that?
My interpretation of the character of Bond?
Mm-hmm, originally.
Well, my interpretation of the character Bond was that he was a ballsy English secret agent. It was not Fleming's idea.
Mm-hmm.
Fleming's idea was that he is a school tie jet, like Roger Moore portrays him now.
Uh-huh.
But being an American, my feeling was we wanted an Englishman that had balls. And that's why we got Sean. The accent didn't bother me. The accent I liked. I loved the Scotch accent. And so he was supposed to be British, not necessarily an Englishman, in my view, And we liked Sean for it. Thought he was aces. The way he talked, the way he walked, everything about him. Sex appeal, everything else. And United Artists, when we first sent the test back, actually, Sean didn't want to test. He didn't test for the part. We liked him. We didn't need to make a test. But United Artists wanted to see him on film.
Mm-hmm.
So Sean tested.
Do you remember what he tested for? Like what scene?
Well, he played one or two of the scenes. Don't remember which ones, no. But he tested with the girl. Just did it with the girls. It wasn't a test on him. It was a test on the girls. That was the only way we, could get something back to United Artists to see.
Oh, in other words,
they said, try somebody else. They didn't like it. In other words, they didn't think he was right. And I said, this is the guy we're going to use, and we went ahead. Harry and I both agreed on that.
UA wasn't easy to convince to do the films either. I read somewhere that they didn't want to back the films at first. It took
No, that's not true.
Isn't true?
No. That's not true, because I made the deal in about 45, 50 minutes. The deal was made.
Really? Now, you had taken the films to Columbia first, is that true?
No. Where'd you get that? Because that's interesting too.
Okay. I think Terrence says that. He says that you had taken the project to Columbia mainly because that was wasn't it the studio you worked with Irving Allen? That was the studio you worked with, and you decided to take it to them first? That's not true?
Yes. I called Mike Frankovich.
Mm-hmm.
Gave him an opportunity to, originally. And he said, he didn't think, that they would go for that sort of thing. But he would present it. Then we didn't hear from him for some time. In the meantime, I called out the Crib in New York, who was a friend of mine many years. I told him I was, I had these properties and wanted to do it. Told him that I was in partners with a fellow called Harry Saltzman. He didn't know Harry Saltzman at that time. And, but he said, well, come into New York and talk to me. Don't talk to me on the phone. I went into New York to talk to him. When I made plans to go in, Harry said, well, look, I'd like to come in too. With you. So I said, all right. I made arrangements for him to come in with me because at the time I had to make all the arrangements because there was a little shortage of cash on this side. And I made the arrangements, and that he wanted to bring his wife, or his wife. We went to New York and got there. I brought my wife with me because we had a baby. When we got there, we went up and saw Arthur Krim. And David Picker was the new boy in charge of production, just got the job. And in the room there were all of the big shots. There were all of the main production people, Arnold Picker, David Picker.
Bud Orenstein?
No, Bud Orenstein wasn't in there. Bud Orenstein was not. He had nothing to do really with it. So we talked about Bond, and I was surprised to see them all there because I thought it would be just sort of Arthur Krim, and if he didn't like it, he'd give us a brush off. But they were all there, and we talked the deal, and made a deal based on just conversation. It was all agreed, hands were shaken, and the part comes in where you're talking about, comes in later about going to see Columbia, was that after we made the deal for 6 pictures.
Oh, you did make a deal for 6.
We made a deal option, 1 picture and option for 6. Then Harry, we walked to the lift, and Harry said, "We haven't got a deal." I said, "What do you mean we haven't got a deal?" He says, "Well, have you got a piece of paper?" I said, "No, I haven't got a piece of paper." But I shook Arthur Krim's hand. We all shook hands. That's a deal. So he said, "We haven't got a deal. Not unless we got a piece of paper. We better go over to Columbia and see the Columbia people, because they were having a board meeting that day, and they were supposed to decide whether they would do it." So I went back and saw Arthur Krim, and I said, "Arthur, I'd like a piece of paper." He said, "Sure." He says, "You have a letter of agreement?" I said, "That's right." He said, "When you get to London, it'll be there." I said, "But I'm not going to London right away. I'd like it, if I can, Arthur." Don't ask me to explain it. Just, could I have a piece of paper, a rough letter of agreement? Maybe you could send it over to the house, to the hotel tonight.
Did you agree with Harry that you need a piece of paper? I mean...
Well, I didn't really feel so, but I mean, if he felt that way, I was going to get the piece of paper. So he said, "Okay, there'll be a piece of paper tonight at your hotel. What hotel are you staying at?" I went back to the hotel. I went back to the lift where Harry was waiting for me, and I said, "Well, he's going to send the letter to us tonight." He says, "We better go over and see Frankovich." We went over to Columbia and we saw Frankovich. I said, "Well, how come, we've got a deal, and what are we going to do? We go to see Frankovich." "Oh," he says, "we haven't got a deal." So I wasn't confident that we'd get a deal that Columbia was interested anyway. So we went over, and Columbia came out of that meeting. He said, "Look, unless you can make these things for $400,000, we can't agree to go ahead with the deal." At which point Harry got very angry and rightfully told him that they didn't know what the hell they were talking about. You couldn't make these pictures for that price. In a sense, it was a turn down of that sort, you see. That night I got the letter of agreement. Told Harry. It was in the same hotel. In fact, it was where he wanted to stay.
What was the deal? Did you got a good deal from UA, or a kind of a...
Well, we got a deal based on the deal I had, based on my contract with Columbia that I had before, which were Irving Allen and I making pictures for Columbia. It was a fairly good deal at that time. Since then, of course, the deal was better, but...
Budget on the first film was $1 million?
Yeah. So that's the way it started, right there in New York. 21st of June.
In 61.
61.
Well, whose decision was to do Dr. No?
We started off doing Thunderball. And then we realized that it would be too expensive. And we turned back to
Dr. No.
Dr. No, which was lucky because later on there was litigation on it.
Uh-huh.
And they're very wealthy.
That's true. That Fleming was about to go into that big court thing with McClory.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. I talked to Maybaum. He said he did write a script on Thunderball and that they changed around at the last minute.
We did,
Backtracking, Cubby, I'd like to talk about you a little bit because, like, I've read a lot of movie research material and it doesn't talk too much about your background. You were born in this country?
Yeah, of course. I was born in New York. In Astoria, Long Island, actually.
Was your family in the business, in the movie business?
No, my family were farmers.
Is that where the broccoli influence comes? Does that go back a long ways?
Yes, it does, yes.
That's the original people who invented the...
Well, when they say invented, it's wrong to say invented. It was my ancestors that raised the broccoli. My uncle, whose name was DeSico, brought the first broccoli seed over to America.
Mm-hmm.
And he raised the first broccoli seed on Long Island, my uncle,
Uh-huh.
whose name was DeSico,
What was his first name?
Pasquale DeSico.
Uh-huh. When was this? In the 1800s?
No, he came over about in late, about 90, I guess. But he raised the first seed raised the first broccoli in about 1900, 1898 or something like that, on Long Island,
Mm-hmm.
and farmed there. And which now, it's interesting because that very farm that is there in Astoria, Long Island, on that farm sits the Boys Club of Queens, which I'm the one that supports the Boys Club.
Oh.
And
So your father was a farmer as well?
my father was not a farmer, no. He was a civil engineer.
Mm. Was he born in this country?
No, he was born, my mother and father born in Italy, both born in Italy. But later on he retired as civil engineer, and we had a farm out in Long Island, and we raised broccoli and all the vegetables and truck cart and stuff. And my brother and I, we brought it into New York and used to sell it in the Harlem market.
Uh-huh.
It's a long story. But that's where it all originated from. But we were the originators of broccoli coming into this country.
That's very interesting. Was it profitable for your family? Did you live well?
No, it wasn't. It was profitable for my uncle,
Uh-huh.
but farming was a disaster. I mean, it was not a disaster. We lived, and we went to school, and and all of that. But it was in those days. There was nobody was subsidizing the farmers, and you had to buy your own fertilizers and spend a lot of money. And if the market was flooded, prices went down, and the middleman made all the money and sold everything at inflated prices retail. And you'd come back a lot of times with have to dump half of the vegetables into the Harlem market at that time, rather than to truck them back to 60 miles out of Long Island. So it was not successful, but it was successful for my uncle because he retired. He had the concession for selling all of the seed, the broccoli seed.
Mm-hmm.
So he became quite a wealthy man.
Where did you attend school? Did you go to elementary school in Long
I went
Island?
to elementary school in Long Island. My schooling was kind of meager. I went to high school there, and then I went to a night school. I started a course at night school at City College on journalism, which I never completed.
Mm-hmm. Did you like writing at that time?
Writing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I liked the idea of writing.
Uh-huh. So you didn't attend college after high school?
Yeah.
What did you do after high school?
Worked. You had to work, on the farm. We were still operating the farm.
Uh-huh.
And we worked on the farm, my brother and myself, because we had to operate it.
Mm-hmm.
Mother and father couldn't operate alone.
Is that, you have just one brother? Is that your
I had
family?
one brother, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And we both ran the farm
Uh-huh.
until and then we had a big farm down in Florida, a huge farm down there, which we were wiped out with the blight and with the hurricanes.
Uh-huh.
So disaster. Farming was, in that sense, a disaster.
Then what did you do?
Then I went to work in New York worked in the drugstore as an assistant pharmacist to the pharmacist
Where was the drugstore?
Esther in Long Island. And then after that, quit and went to work for a cousin of mine, whose name was unearthed, and he had a casket company, and he manufactured coffins, caskets. And I ran the office and talked to people and contacted people to sell, undertakers, to sell caskets to them.
Did you like that?
And did very well with that. No, I didn't like it. I hated it.
But it was money.
But I was making a living.
Were you still living at home?
And in that sense, and I was living in
Astoria.
In Astoria, but with my grandmother. And the farming, we gave up the farming in Long Island. My father died. We gave up the farm. My brother went down to Florida, and so then my mother, we sold the farm, and my mother moved into New York. And I was doing very well for the company, for the casket company, but I was very depressed about being in that business. And I came to Hollywood to see a cousin of mine.
Who's that?
Called Pat DeSico, the son of my uncle.
Oh. And what was Pat doing?
He was married to Thelma Todd at the time, and just divorced her.
Actress,
yes. So I came out here, and I never went back. I decided to stay here. Went to work, struggled a long time before I found my way.
What did you have to do? What things were you doing?
Well, I did everything. I sold beauty parlor supplies, hair nets, hair dryers, everything. A company here called Paris Beauty Parlor Supply.
What was the name of it?
Paris Beauty Parlor Supply.
Paris Beauty Parlor Supply. When was this, in the 30s?
No, it was a little bit later than that. Yeah, about 30, yeah. In the 30s, yes, of course, 37, 36. And then,
Before the war.
Before the war. And then I finally went to work for Howard Hawks, who was a friend of mine who just died recently. He was doing a picture called The Outlaw, and I went out as a sort of assistant T-boy, whatever, and tried to learn the business. And
what's a T-boy?
well,
gopher.
My title was assistant director, but I was a gopher. And in order to try to learn something about the business.
How did you meet Howard?
Well, I had a lot of friends. Howard Hawks was one of them, and Howard Hughes was another one. He was working for Howard Hughes. And,
did you meet these people selling beauty parlor supplies?
No, of course not. No, I met them throughout, I had a little money when I first came here. And, socially, I met them. Met Howard socially. I met Hawks socially. And later on, I became, after I finished working on The Outlaw with Hawks got fired or quit. He and Hughes got into a fight, so then I finished working on the picture while Howard Hughes was directing it.
That's it. I'm confusing that one with the one with Jane Russell. This is a different film.
That's the one.
Oh, this is Jane Russell.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought that was later.
Well,
Oh, that is later then. This is after the war then.
yeah.
46, 45. I think
that was later, yes. But I during the war, I was in the Navy.
Oh, you were in the Navy during the war?
Yeah, in the Navy.
Which part of the Navy?
Well, I went into the 11th Naval District.
That's in San Diego?
In San Diego, yeah. But then they put me into a special branch of service entertainment because I'd been working for Fox. I went to work for Fox.
Daryl Zanuck was there then at that time.
Well, I worked for Henry King, and I worked for a lot of various as an assistant, which I got in there through Joe Skank, who was a friend of mine.
Oh, so you had some good contacts.
I had a good contact. And
so you were still working as an assistant at Fox?
Yeah.
So you got into entertainment in 11th Naval District.
Yeah.
But John Ford was in that thing too, wasn't he? Or was he doing documentaries?
He was in the Navy, yes. He was.
So you didn't go overseas, you stayed in Hollywood?
Oh, I went overseas with various groups.
Like USO type
Yeah,
things?
right. And I went overseas with various people, you know.
Did you go like to Europe or Pacific?
No, the South Pacific.
South Pacific.
Up to Alaska's and places like that.
Oh.
Up to hospitals up in San Francisco, you know, when they were shipping people out and wounded were coming in on aircraft carriers. I was with the Hollywood. I was in the Navy, the 11th Naval District. I was a yeoman, second class. And then my job became so enormous that they decided they'd have to make me an officer by congressional act. So they gave me an ensign. Made me an ensign. I was probably the oldest ensign in the Navy, I suppose, at the time. So,
you ever get into combat, or that was like on the...
no, we went out in combat. We were lucky to avoid that.
So this outlaw film was near the end, after the war.
The outlaw film was, yes, it
I
was.
believe that was released in 45, so that would have been right near the end of the war.
Well, the war was 42. I was in the Navy for almost 4 years. It was after that. So it was about 45, 46, I should think, that the outlaw was out.
So this was then your contacts with Henry King and things
Well,
continued?
early I was working as an assistant at Fox, to the same, and I say, you know, a T-boy, but I mean, I was the assistant director by...
So did you meet Hawks before you went to Fox?
Oh, I knew Hawks way before that.
So then after your Fox, you went into the outlaw?
Yeah.
Okay, then what? Then from there, you stayed at with him for a while, or did you
Well,
go?
I was, I'm really not sure about those dates there. I think you thrown me. I think we have to look at when the outlaw was. Because, anyway, I went from Fox. See, I went from Fox into the Navy. So I'm wondering whether...
I'm not positive about the outlaw being in 45, but I think I recall it being then.
Yeah, it was after that. But anyway, I served my apprenticeship at Fox. Now, you see, after the war, I went to work for Charlie Feldman in the agency business.
Oh.
And that was after the war.
See, is that MCA?
No, that was Famous Artists at that time. And he handled all the big clients. It was as big as MCA.
This is another one of your friends, Charlie Feldman?
Charlie was a friend of mine.
Did you like that, the
Well,
agency?
he brought me in there because I brought in Lana Turner in as a client. She was a friend of mine, and she came in as a client, and so I worked in as an agent. Working for Feldman, and went into business with a friend of mine, Irving Allen.
Now, how did you meet Alan?
Well, I knew him in school in New York, you see.
In elementary school, high school?
No, and he was going to, I was going to night school, and he was going to Bryant High School in New York.
Bryant?
Bryant High School, yeah.
So you were high school buddies?
Yeah. Except that I was working during the day. I was going to night, he was going to day.
Irving Allen now, you were with him as your high school buddy. Now he was a producer then?
No, he wasn't. He was a struggling director, you know, directing pictures, and we went into business together to do the first picture I did over in Europe, The Red Beret.
The paratrooper film with Alan Ladd.
Yeah, it was called The Red Beret. Yeah.
What made you want to do it in England?
Well, we went over there because of the subsidies and all the benefits.
It was a good idea to do that at that time. How much did the beret cost?
It cost about $1.2 million.
And it was a big success. Now, did you work through Columbia? That was the main studio?
Yeah, it was a long story, but we finally made a deal with them, and they put up the money. Just got to put somebody's name on this phone number there. They They financed it.
You started living over there. Is that true?
Yeah, I lived there for 25 years.
Uh-huh.
From that time on.
Uh-huh.
1952. I was only in 52 and lived there for 25 years.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
You didn't have any regrets about leaving America at the time?
No, I didn't, because you couldn't get anything started here, shooting and making films here, so made a deal, went over there based on the idea of making a picture with Alan Ladd, the Red Beret. It started my whole career as a producer.
Uh-huh.
Because we made 3 pictures with Alan Ladd, and both Irving and I gained a lot of experience and a lot of stature.
Uh-huh.
The first 3 pictures were the 3 biggest grosses for Columbia that year, those years.
And they weren't that expensive to make too, so...
Well, they were very big, successful pictures.
Uh-huh.
At that time, they were like $7 or $8 million gross worldwide,
very big.
which was pretty big.
Where were you living at that time?
London.
In London? Where?
Oh, in a place called Portland Place.
Oh, yeah, I know where that is. That's where Michael lives now.
Yeah.
Sure. Now, Harry was the one who found the books first. Is that true?
Well, no, it isn't true. The books I wanted to do when Irving and I were finished. Irving and I completed it. And 2 boys from 2 friends of mine, brothers, called McLeans. Jock McLean and Ned McLean.
Uh-huh.
Were friends of Ian Fleming. And they liked the stories.
Mm-hmm.
And they asked me if I had read the stories. I said, yes, I had read a couple of them. And they said, well, read the others and they're quite wealthy. And they said, we will make a deal with Fleming to buy the properties. And you and your partner Irving can make them.
Were they in the movie business?
No, they were not. They're just quite wealthy, and they invested the money in things.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, that sounds like a good idea. And I was in New York on some personal business, and I couldn't leave. Had my children there at the time. And
were you married before?
I was married before to another woman, and she was in the hospital. She was dying of cancer, so I couldn't leave, you see. I don't want to put all of that in, it's not really very, but anyway, I couldn't leave New York.
Uh-huh.
So I called Irving Allen in London, and I told him that Ned McLean was coming over, and told him about this, and I said, read some of the Bond books because we can make a deal. And get a hold, and I called Fleming's agent and set up, McLean went over there with Ned McLean with Fleming's agent, who I knew was an agent over there.
That isn't Bob Fenn, is it?
Bobby Fenn.
It is Bob Fenn, okay.
And Bobby Fenn and the Fleming, and I'm not sure whether Fleming was there or not. I think he was. They had dinner at lunch at the Les Ambassadors with Ned McLean and Irving Allen. And Irving, bless his heart, he's a lovely guy, but I don't think he really read the stories properly. Because he said, well, he didn't know when they'd start talking about how much they wanted for them. He said, well, I don't think my partner knows. These properties aren't good enough, not even for television, not good enough for films. At which point, Mr. Fenn and Fleming and everybody got very upset, pissed off. And so that was the end of me with Fleming at this point, you see.
What was this?
This was, as I said, when my wife was, or was married at that time, was sick. That was just, we were making a picture, that was like 1959. No, it was 58, 57. Irving and I had just completed a picture. We just completed making a picture of Oscar Wilde. It was our last picture.
Oh yeah, Ken Adam was the art director on that film.
That's right. I hired Ken Adam for that. And that was when Irving and I broke up, you see.
Now, did you break up over this, or just...
No, we just weren't compatible anymore. But
Is he still alive?
Irving, yeah, he's here. We're very good friends.
Oh.
And
So that was the end of that.
that was the end of that.
Uh-huh.
See. And I couldn't approach them anymore until Irving and I were, because we were still in business. Then when I broke up, I was doing a script with a fellow called Mankiewicz, Wolf Mankiewicz, not Tom Mankiewicz.
See, he was an English writer, wasn't he?
Yeah. And I wasn't happy with the project we were doing. It was called the Arabian Nights Entertainment. And he said, well, what would you want to do? I said, well, the only thing I want to do is the Bond things fascinate me. He said, why don't you get him? And I told him the story. He said, well, I know the guy that's got an option on them, but he hasn't been able to make a deal with anybody. He said, why don't I talk to him and have him come in and see you?
Uh-huh.
And maybe you can buy his option. Or I told him I had this problem with the flooding through Irving, that I was not in good graces because this man could come all the way over there to meet, and Irving told him they weren't good enough for, they didn't do enough for television. So, he claims that Irving left him with the check as well. Ned McLean. So that was the end of that. And then Wolf Mankiewicz said, well, I said, well, I'd like to do the Bond things. Well, why don't you? So he arranged for this man to come in and see me. And that man was Harry Saltzman.
You had offices then on Audley Square, or was that where you were?
Yeah, well, we were in Miami.
Yeah.
At the building next door. The office, I had better offices right up. I owned the building. Irving and I owned the building right next door.
Oh. Was that number 2 or number
3?
Number 3.
3 Audley Square. This is 2 South Audley Street, right next door. So...
Had you known of Saltzman?
No, I never knew him. So in comes this little guy and starts talking. He's talking about every property except Bond. And I said, look, Mr. Saltzman, Wolf said you would come in here that you had an option, and that the option has 28 days left. And I would like to exercise that option. I would like to get that option. If you could pass it off to me in some arrangement, I'd like to pay for it, I'll give you £1,000 for it or whatever, because he hadn't been able to do. No, he didn't want to do that. He said then, Bond, he had tried to put it together, that he'd gone to everybody and nobody wanted him. He said, that's a bit of nonsense, Bond. He said, there's not. So I said, well, I'd still like to do it. But no, and he started talking about other properties. A property he wanted to do called Gold in the Streets about Italian immigrants. Since my mother and father were both Italian immigrants, I thought it was kind of strange that he should be telling me about Italian immigrants, but anyway. Then he wanted to do another property called a story about a scarecrow.
A scarecrow?
Yeah, it was a story about a girl who falls in love with a scarecrow.
Sounds like the Wizard of Oz.
Well, no, it wasn't really. It was, and then this Glory in My Rags, I think it was called. And there's a story about, anyway, it was made later by Fox. Rapture in My Rags, it was called.
Rapture in My Rags? That was the name of the Fox film?
It was the name of the book that he wanted to buy, wanted to do this. Look, I'm not interested in all of that. I just want, make a long story short, I said, all right, look. He said, what I'll do is I'll give you 50% of it. If you can make a deal, then we'll become partners 50-50. Well, he didn't want 50-50 at first, but I said, well, it has to be 50-50. So I made the deal.
Now, who did you make a deal with?
Crib.
Crim. Now, what happened to these guys, the McClures?
Well, that was years earlier.
That was over.
That was over. I mean, they were pissed off at me, rightfully so.
So this is like 3 years later that you met Sullivan.
that was much. That was about 3 years later.
Oh.
3 or 4 years later. 3 years later, because I was.
Now, my impression of Harry, from what everybody seems to tell me, I haven't talked to him, is he's very, very fast and has his hands in a lot of pots, very animated, while you were more quiet and conservative. Is that true? I mean, you balanced each other out down through the years for a while. Is that true?
Well, no, I don't. Well, I mean, I don't. I can't comment on Harry. I mean, other people can comment on Harry. All I can say is that I was not interested in doing all of the things Harry wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
Getting into various different businesses that I knew nothing about, and I felt he knew nothing about, like Technicolor and camera companies and things like this, and I just didn't want to get involved. I only wanted to stick to what I knew. As little as I know about the film business, that's all I wanted to do.
Well,
and that was it. You want some coffee?
You got the okay from Crim, and you set out to...
We set out and we made Dr. No.
Now, Terrence Young, was he your first choice as director?
No, he wasn't, strangely enough. I'd worked with him on many pictures. Terrence and I did about 7 or 8 pictures. I liked him for it. But, strangely enough, he had a bad patch. Very bad patch in there, and he was not really. He had a couple of pictures that weren't successful, so United Artists weren't interested in him. But the other directors that I tried to get, the Guy Greens, the Guy Hamiltons, and the various ones, turned it down.
You wanted an English director?
Yeah, English director. And I tried one American director, and he didn't want to come over, which was all right too, because he wasn't right for it.
Who was that?
I forget his name. He's a young Western guy. And having done that, I finally said to, thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
You're not honest that we would put up the completion and the bond for Terrence, but we felt that Terrence was the right guy to do it. At least I felt Terrence was the right guy because I'd worked with him. Harry didn't know him, and Harry, was not all that keen because, on the face of it, Terrence's record, the last 3 pictures before Bond were not all that good. He did something called Black Stockings, and it was a good film, but it wasn't successful. Then he did a picture with Alan Ladd. I think it was called Hannibal or something, and that didn't work out. In fact, I don't think it was made. It was completed. So therefore, I had a tough time convincing United Artists that Terrence was the right man.
Now, you said you had to put up a completion agreement or something?
Well, yeah, we had to put up a completion bond.
Now, that means that if the film falls behind or goes over budget or something like that, they pick up the extra money or they pay for the film. How does that work?
The bond, you pay a fee to the people putting up the bond, and they see that the picture's completed. That was because of United Artists insisted on a completion bond. At that time, it was being done, we paid the fee. We had to pay the fee for it. But those things really were. I wasn't worried about Terrence, at all. I was convinced Terrence was the right guy to do it. But these were the things that they put on because of Terrence's momentary record there that hurt him.
He turned out to be very good, though, I thought.
Well, of course, he did 3 pictures, and they were all great for me. Anyway, he did other pictures, too, which were very good. But anyway, that was one of the problems. And finally, I convinced UA we were going to use Terrence. Actually, I'd also convinced Harry. And then I brought Ken Adam in from Italy. He just finished a big Italian picture there, which was, I forget what it was called now. And got my Ted Moore, who was a cameraman on some of the other earlier pictures I made at Warwick.
He was friends with Terrence, though. They were a team. Had they been?
Well, they'd worked together, but they weren't really a team. He'd worked. He did. It was Trials of Oscar Wilde that he did with Ken Hughes. Ted was actually a camera operator when Terrence and I were working, when I was producing with Terrence. So I produced about 8 pictures with Terrence before.
At Warwick.
Yeah. Irving Allen and I both. Including the first one. And that was when Ted was the operator on Red Beret.
I didn't get to see Ted when I was there. He was gone for something. That was one of the interviews I missed. He was a very good. He did probably all the Bonds except for I think You Only Live Twice and the last 2, right?
He did 1 or 2 or 3 of them, yeah, something like that. I don't remember that.
Now,
anyway, that was the way it got started.
Ursula. Terrence has a little story about Ursula Andress. He says that he brought in an actress named Julie Christie to see you, and
that's where it's the bullshit.
Now that's a bullshit story?
Bullshit. He didn't bring Julie Christie in at all. I brought Julie Christie in not on, and it was not on this picture. It was on a later picture. It was on Thunderball.
Thunderball.
And that's where he's got himself all screwed up. But let's get to Ursula Andress first. We didn't have a girl. We couldn't find a girl. Everybody was floundering around, and there were stacks of pictures on the table in our office when the building I owned at Audley Square. And this round thing was in Harry's office, this table. I gave him an office upstairs. And on there, looking, and we're very despondent, there's about 3 weeks before we're getting ready to shoot in Jamaica, we had no girl. And I'm looking through these just casually, quite despondent, I see a face of a girl. And it's dripping wet. This beautiful, magnificent face. He's just out of a swimming pool or in the sea or something. And I said to Harry, "Who is this girl?" Look at the back. He said, "Well, there's a name on the back. It was Ursula Andress." I said, "Who is this?" He said, "Oh, that's a girl, one of Goulash's girls he brought in here. She's nothing. She can't act."
One of whose?
Goulash.
Who's that?
Goulash was a man called Johnny Shepridge. He used to be an agent. He used to work with Zanuck, and he worked with Charlie Feldman.
Johnny Shepridge?
Shepridge.
Yeah.
That's one of Goulash's.
What is his nickname?
Yeah, Goulash's girlfriends. He said she's married to John Derrick, but she can't act. I said, "What do you mean she can't? Look at that face." Jesus, who the hell cares if she can do anything? We got to find out who she is. "Oh, I know. She, pistache butter on her." So I got on the phone and I called Max Arno from Columbia, who I knew when I was working at Columbia. I said, "Do you know a girl called Ursula Andress?" He says, "Yeah, she's married to John Jack. What about her?" I said, "Well, is she as beautiful as the pictures?" He says, "Well, there's no pictures can say that she's more beautiful than she is in person. She's the most beautiful thing you ever saw. Pictures can't do the justice of the beauty of this girl." And I said, "She's got that figure?" He says, "Yeah, she's got the figure." "Have you got any film?" "No, we haven't. We have some television footage on her where she plays something like a witch, and I'll send it on to you, but it won't show any very much." But he said, "Her voice isn't all that great, she has an accent. But in fact," he said something I really wouldn't want to repeat. "She talks like a Dutch comic." And he said, "She's absolutely beautiful." And, well, I said, "Can you make a deal with her?" He said, "Sure, I'll make a deal with her. For what you want." I said, "Well, we need her for about guarantee of 6 weeks. Give her $1,000 a week. And send it to Terrence Young, who was going to be in Jamaica. And Harry was saying, Jesus Christ, I don't think I said, look, Harry, what do we got to lose? She's a beautiful bloody girl. And, we limit the dialogue, she'll be great. Anyway, that's the way it started. She went down there.
Did she come to you to meet you? Or
No, I never saw her.
You never saw her?
In person in my life until I got to the location. Neither did anyone else down there. Neither did Terrence Young or Sean Connery. And the minute Sean saw her, he knew she was fantastic. He knew it. So did Terrence. And we put her in that bikini, and she ran up and down that beach like an antelope. And we managed to coach her, and we looped to certain lines, and well, the rest is history.
Turned out very well, I think.
That was it. Of course, she worked more than 6 weeks, and it was our first chance. But he never found her. None of these guys found her. There was a picture sitting on the goddamn desk.
Where'd the picture
right under our eyes?
Some Shepherd's guy.
Shepherd's said, "Here's a girl you ought to look at." At least I can say is, Harry and I brought these people out in the light. Although I must say, Harry saw this picture, but he didn't have a clue about this girl, and he didn't know. And it's just the fact that it was described to me in Fleming's book, this girl coming out of the water with wet, and that gave me the clue. Of seeing this picture, this is the girl. Anyway.
Dr. No has a science fiction touch that really isn't in the book. I mean, even a lot of this nuclear reactor stuff, was that your feeling that you wanted to give it a more updated feeling? Because the book is not, even though it also involves toppling spacecraft,
that's what it does.
but it doesn't talk about these beautiful sets and everything.
No, well, we did that to build it up.
Joseph Wiseman, whose choice was he?
Harry's.
Harry came up with him.
Harry suggested him.
He was very good. Ironically, Ursula was one of the few Bond girls who really went on to be something else other than your films. Most of your girls, I wonder about them. I went over to see the Bond films the other night at the New Art, and I still like Danielle Bianchi from Rush of Love. She's a beautiful girl. Whatever happened?
But she got married, right away, and she didn't go on.
How did you find her?
Well, I saw her in Italy and brought her into London, made tests. And I had to fight to get her, too, because Terrence was the director of that picture. He didn't want her. He didn't, let's see, that was in Rush of Love, yeah, he didn't want her. In fact, I had Raquel Welch originally signed for the part.
Of what? Of Domino?
And Domino and Thunderball.
Oh. What happened there?
And then, as a matter of fact, I had Faye Dunaway. And she had her, I saw her in a play in New York. And we made a deal with her, and her papers were signed. Her tickets were over at Mike Beck's office in New York, and she was supposed to go over. And she went and did a picture for Sam Spiegel, which was a Bond.
Sam Spiegel?
Yeah.
What picture was that?
I don't know, some small picture which she never materialized.
So she was going to play Domino and Thunderball.
She was going to do the part, yes.
Oh my God, Faye Dunaway? But
she's unknown. She was doing a play in Broadway. Anyway, that's.
Well, where did Claudine Auger come from?
Well, that's Harry brought her in.
Harry brought her in
from later, she was all right,
I like
Harry
her.
And Terrence brought her in from Paris. And we interviewed her. But I had Raquel Welch. She came over to the Beverly Hills Hotel, made a deal with the agent, and went back to London. And Charles, Richard Zanuck called me. He was running 20th Century Fox. He said, Cubby, we're very good friends, and she said, I've got to ask you a favor. I said, why? What is it? You've got to do me a favor. There's a girl that you signed, and I got to use her in a picture. And I know, you use unknowns, and this girl is an unknown. She doesn't mean all that much to you. I'd like to do me a favor. Let me out of the deal. I said, well, Jesus, I can't do that. Richard, I've got a partner. I have to talk. So.
He wanted her for a fantastic voyage.
I forget what it was. He did it with her. And it was her first picture over there. She was just a bit clear. I saw it in a magazine. Harry and I both saw the magazine, and Harry and I said, well, when you get over, see her. And I said, okay. So finally, Dennis Sullinger, who was his man over there, or at least our agent over there, and I said to Harry, look, well, I don't really give a shit, She's a new girl. If we want to do Zanuck the favor, we'll do him the favor. If you want to, I don't care. So we decided to do him the favor. And he used it. We had two different girls that became quite big stars.
Very big.
Donaway and Raquel Welch.
And they,
maybe they wouldn't have been so big if they'd have come in the bottom. I don't know. But that's another story.
Do you have a philosophy that we will not pay money to get an actress, and that she has
I have a philosophy that we need fresh people in the Bond pictures. That's the philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, Faye Dunaway at this stage could not add 10 cents to the box office. I mean, there's only one girl that sells tickets anyway, and that's Barbra Streisand, as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm.
So she couldn't help my picture. I mean, she's a good actress. Faye Dunaway, some of these others. And they would add that much more sex to it. But I question whether it's going to add any money to the box office.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is the biggest picture we've ever had, bigger than any other picture we've ever made, after 16 years.
That's amazing.
And we use an unknown girl who was really unknown.
Very.
Very unknown, and that's it.